$99 billion, $36 billion, $11 billion. I mean, these aren't just abstract numbers.
Right, well, not at all.
They represent absolutely massive corporate failures. You know, the Time Warner deal.
Oh, yeah.
Daimler Chrysler.
Yeah.
HP Bioautonomy, these huge M&A disasters, you look into them, and often there's this common thread. Something crucial got missed. Something went wrong during, well, what we're talking about today, due diligence.
Exactly. It's a really powerful reminder, isn't it? Even these massive companies, with all their resources, they can still trip up badly if they don't do that deep dive before committing.
And while, okay, maybe you're not buying Time Warner.
Probably not.
The principle, that risk of major financial pain if you skip the homework, that translates directly to buying commercial property. It's the same core risk for you, the buyer.
Absolutely. The scale might be different, but the potential consequences feel just as devastating when it's your money on the line.
Okay, so let's really unpack this. We got a whole pile of material here. Legal articles, checklists, industry reports, even some case studies. And they all point to this one phase in a U.S. commercial real estate deal as being just critical.
The due diligence period.
Right. And it's not just some legal formality you tick off. You could argue it's the most important part of the whole process.
I think that's fair to say. Think of it like this. You make an offer, the seller accepts, you're under contract. Now the clock starts ticking.
Okay.
You enter this specific window of time, the due diligence period. It's typically, maybe 30 days, could be 60, 90. It really depends on the deal's complexity and what you negotiate up front.
And during that window, it feels like the power shifts a bit, right? It's the buyer's turn.
It really is. It's your time to investigate, to verify, to basically conduct a forensic audit of the property, and frankly, the seller's claims. You get to, kick the tires, look under the hood.
Check everything out.
Verify what you've been told and uncover what you haven't.
And this is the key part, I think, that sources like Justia and Regency RE really hammer home. This is your main chance to back out.
That's crucial. During this period, if your investigation turns up something you don't like, and it can often be for almost any reason related to your findings, you can terminate the deal.
And get your earnest money back.
And get that deposit back.
Yeah.
If you let that deadline pass without acting on your findings, that earnest money usually goes hard, meaning it's non-refundable. And you're basically locked in, legally speaking, even if you find a huge problem later.
Ouch. Okay, so our mission today for this deep dive is pretty straightforward then. We want to cut through the complexity here. We'll pull out the key insights from all these sources, the must-do steps, the common traps, the strategies, and give you a really clear roadmap. What is due diligence? Why does it matter so much in commercial deals? What are you looking for? And how do you actually manage this whole process?
It boils down to reducing your risk, right?
Okay.
Making decisions based on solid facts, not just optimism or what the seller tells you. And honestly, it gives you real negotiating leverage if you do find issues that impact the property's value or how you plan to use it.
Because those giant M&A blowups show us overlooking one seemingly small detail or just getting swept up in the excitement of the deal.
Yeah, deal fever is real.
It can lead to disaster. Yeah. It's a lesson that applies just as much here. So let's dive in.
Okay, so first things first. Why is this non-negotiable? Let's maybe look closer at those big mistakes and how they connect to protecting your money.
Yeah, at its absolute core, commercial real estate due diligence is it's your structured process for gathering facts, analyzing the property, understanding what it can really do, what the risks are, and what it's actually worth before you own it. It's not just a step, it's like the foundation.
It's definitely a step up from buying a house, right?
Yeah.
In residential deals, sure, you get a home inspection, you check the title, but it's usually simpler. Commercial property, the stakes are way higher. The buildings themselves are more complex. You've got intricate systems, maybe multiple tenants, very specific uses, and the liabilities you could potentially inherit, much, much greater.
Which brings us back to those cautionary tales from the corporate world. Let's revisit Time Warner, a $99 billion loss. The source we looked at mentioned rushed and conventional due diligence. They missed things like incompatible networks.
It's a huge technical hurdle.
Right. Cultural clashes, management problems, operational headaches.
It's like they focused so much on the idea of synergy, they missed the practical mess of actually putting the companies together. For a CRE buyer, maybe you're not merging networks, but you could inherit a building with totally inadequate tech infrastructure, for your business.
Like the wiring can't handle your equipment or the internet is ancient?
Exactly.
Huh.
Or maybe the cultural clash is inheriting tenants who are just constantly causing problems, making it impossible to manage the property effectively. A quick walkthrough or a glance at the rent roll wouldn't catch that.
Okay, then Daimler Chrysler. A $36 billion failure. The source was pretty blunt. Actually, no due diligence before closing. Management was apparently just dazzled by Chrysler's profits.
Blinded by the numbers.
And they totally ignored cultural issues, market realities.
That's the danger of letting that shiny object, that potential profit, cloud your judgment.
Yeah.
In CRE, maybe you see a high net operating income, a great NOI on the seller's report.
Looks fantastic.
But did you dig deeper? Is that NOI inflated because of, say, short-term leases at crazy high rates that won't last? Are expenses being hidden or deferred? Just like Daimler missed the fit, you could miss whether the property's real costs or tenant stability actually fit your investment plan.
And HP buying autonomy, an $11 billion write-down because, again, poor due diligence missed that the financials were cooked.
Yeah, income, balance sheets, cash flows, they were misrepresented. HP paid way too much because they didn't verify the actual financial health.
That's a direct parallel for income property, isn't it? The seller gives you the rent roll, the expense report.
And your job, your financial due diligence, has to go way beyond just reading those numbers. You need to check the rent roll against the actual signed leases. You need to look at tenant payment histories. Understand the real operating expenses. Look for capital costs they've been putting off. If you don't, you could overpay massively based on rosy, misleading figures.
Even Sprint Nextel, nearly $30 billion written off.
Okay.
Same story. Missed technical problems, cultural mismatches, key people leaving after the deal, technical, human, operational stability, all overlooked.
So all these examples, they really drive home the same point. Overlooked issues, technical, financial, legal, operational, they can sink you. In commercial real estate, your due diligence is specifically designed to sniff out these kinds of risks before you buy. Are the financials accurate? Are the building systems sound? Are there hidden legal bombs like unpaid taxes or lindinos? Are the tenants stable? Is the property compliant?
And one source, Sarah and Associates, explicitly warns about inheriting things like unpaid property taxes, outstanding rents from contractors, ongoing disputes with tenants you didn't even know about, or finding out the building doesn't meet regulatory requirements. These are common, expensive surprises due diligence aims to prevent.
Yeah, the fallout from skipping this step or just doing a half-hearted job, it's ugly. The sources list a whole range of potential nightmares. The property value craters after you buy it because of a hidden defect. You face enormous unexpected repair bills, or worse, environmental cleanup costs.
Environmental, we'll get to that.
Oh, yeah. Your own business operations get disrupted. The government tells you can't actually use the property the way you planned. You get sued over pollution someone else caused decades ago. You can't pay back your loan because the property isn't worth what you thought. Legal battles with the seller or the tenants you inherited.
Yeah.
It's a long list.
That story you mentioned from Regent CRE, the person buying a $250,000 property and finding millions in potential environmental cleanup costs during due diligence. That's terrifying. It shows the liability isn't always proportional to the price tag.
Exactly right. It's a perfect stark example. Hidden issues can absolutely dwarf the purchase price. And that's why this period isn't just about defense, it's about offense too. It gives you negotiation power.
How so?
Well, let's say you find problems the roof needs replacing sooner than expected. There's some soil contamination that needs addressing. The zoning isn't quite right for your expansion plan. One of the leases has really unfavorable terms. It doesn't automatically mean you walk away.
Okay.
It means you go back to the seller. You say, look, we found this. It's going to cost X dollars to fix or reduces the value by Y, and you negotiate. Ask for a price cut. Ask for a credit at closing. Ask the seller to fix it before you buy. Or if the problems are just too big or the seller won't budge,
then you have that power to walk away.
then you use your exit hatch.
Yeah.
You walk away, get your undisputed money back,
Yeah.
and avoid buying a massive headache.
Which logically leads us straight into the how, the deep dive checklist. What are the specific things you absolutely have to investigate?
Right. It's a broad investigation covering a lot of ground. Sources like Pickett's Browse and tenant reps really stress using a detailed checklist so you don't miss anything vital. The specifics will change depending on the property. Of an office building needs a different focus than raw land, but there are key areas you always need to cover.
Let's start with the physical stuff. The building itself, condition and operations.
Okay, so this means getting pros involved. Qualified engineers, building inspectors. This isn't just a casual walkthrough. They do a deep dive into the bones of the building.
Structural integrity.
Yep. How sound is the structure? Then the major systems. HVAC, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, plumbing. Electrical systems. How old are they? What condition are they in? What's the remaining useful life? You need to know if you're facing a huge replacement cost right after buying.
What else? Roof. Parking lots.
Absolutely. Yeah. The roof is critical. Leaks are common and costly. The exterior walls, windows, the building envelope, parking areas, condition, striping, drainage. Speaking of drainage, how does water flow off the site? Are there pooling issues? They're also looking for needed repairs, signs of deferred maintenance, things this seller should have fixed but didn't. And, importantly, do the existing systems meet current building codes? Sometimes older buildings have grandfathered systems, but if you renovate, you might trigger expensive upgrade requirements.
And you mentioned doing your own site visits, too, not just relying on the inspectors.
Definitely. The formal inspection report is crucial, but walking the property yourself, maybe multiple times at different times of day, gives you a different feel. You might notice things the inspector isn't focused on.
Like what?
Like, are there old 55-gallon drums tucked away somewhere? Weird smells? Discolored soil? Or stressed plants that could hint at contamination? Piles of junk. Just the general vibe. Is it cared for or neglected? And look around. What are the neighboring properties like? Is there a noisy factory next door you didn't realize? Is access easy?
Simple things, too, like utilities.
Critical. Is there enough power for your needs? Is the water pressure adequate? If it's a multi-tenant building, are the utilities separately metered, or are you stuck dividing bills? And access and parking, we touched on it, but really check. Are the roads okay? Are the loading docks usable for your trucks? Is there genuinely enough parking for your employees or customers? In some areas, if you don't meet the minimum parking requirements for your use type based on zoning, you can't operate.
Okay, let's shift to one you flagged as potentially huge risk, environmental assessments.
Yeah, this one deserves special attention, particularly if the property ever had industrial or commercial uses, gas stations, dry cleaners, manufacturing, auto repair.
Yeah.
But honestly, it's relevant almost anywhere because of environmental laws, particularly Circle A, the Superfund law.
Explain that liability again. It sounds scary.
It is. Circle can make the current owner responsible for cleaning up contamination, even if you had nothing to do with causing it, even if it happened 50 years before you bought the place, and even if you didn't know about it when you bought it.
Wow. So you could inherit a multi-million-dollar cleanup bill without knowing.
Precisely. That's the risk. It can absolutely destroy the property's value, stop your business plans cold, and make getting loans or insurance incredibly difficult.
So how do you protect yourself? What's the process?
The standard first step is called a Phase I Environmental Site Assessment, or Phase I ESA. Think of it as the initial screening. Its main goal is to identify recognized environmental conditions, RECs.
RECs.
Yeah, basically red flags. Signs that contamination might exist or might have happened in the past or could happen. Things like visible stains, strong odors, records showing risky past uses like a gas station, or knowing there's a contaminated site nearby.
Is it invasive? Do they start digging things up in Phase I?
No, Phase I is non-invasive. It's primarily research and observation. It involves several key tasks. First, a deep dive into historical records. Your environmental consultant looks back decades using old fire insurance maps, aerial photos, city directories, zoning records, title searches to see who owned the property and what they did there. Was it farmland? A factory? A landfill?
So tracking its history.
Exactly. Then the site visit we talked about, but specifically looking for those environmental clues. Weird pipes, monitoring wells, tanks, suspicious dumping areas. Interviews are also key, talking to current and past owners, operators, neighbors. They might know things that aren't in the records, like, oh yeah, old man Smith used to dump his waste oil out back.
Okay.
And a really important part is the regulatory database search. The consultant checks federal and state environmental databases for known contaminated sites within a certain radius. Superfund sites, leaking underground tanks, registered hazardous waste facilities. They also check with local agencies, fire department, health department for any records of spills or violations at or near your property.
Now, you mentioned something about standards, ASTM, AAI.
Yes, this is critical. To potentially qualify for certain legal defenses under Circle, like the innocent landowner defense, which protects you from liability for pre-existing contamination you didn't know about for a phase. ASA must meet specific industry standards. The most common are the ASTM E1527 standard or the EPA's All Appropriate Inquiries, AAI rule.
So just getting any environmental report isn't enough.
Correct. It has to meet these specific, rigorous standards. And just as importantly, it has to be done by a qualified environmental professional who meets defined experience and education criteria under the AAI rule. Using an unqualified person or relying on an old, outdated report could mean you don't meet the standard and you lose that vital liability protection.
How long's a phase I report good for?
Generally, the main components need to be done within 1 year of closing. But certain parts, like the site visit, interviews, and records checks, have a shorter shelf life. They need to be updated if they're more than 180 days old. You can't rely on a report from 2 years ago.
Okay, so what if the phase I does find those RECs, those red flags? What then?
That usually means you need to move to a Phase 2 ESA. The Phase I identified potential problems, the Phase 2 investigates them.
And this is where the digging happens.
Yes. Phase 2 is typically invasive. It involves collecting samples, maybe soil samples using drilling rigs, groundwater samples from monitoring wells, sometimes air or surface water samples. These samples are sent to a lab for analysis to determine if contamination is actually present, what kind of contaminants they are, like petroleum, solvents, metals, and how widespread the problem is.
So if phase 2 confirms contamination, is the deal dead?
Not necessarily, but it's a serious finding that requires careful thought and almost certainly negotiation. What happens next depends on the severity. Maybe the seller agrees to clean it up before closing, like removing leaking tanks or contaminated soil. Maybe you negotiate a significant price reduction to cover the cleanup costs you'll face. Or maybe you structure the deal with specific environmental indemnities, where the seller agrees to cover future costs related to that known contamination.
And lenders care a lot about this too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Lenders can also be liable under CERCLA if they foreclose on contaminated property, so they are extremely focused on environmental risk. They'll insist on a phase I meeting AAI standards, and if issues are found, they'll have their own requirements before approving the loan. Sometimes environmental lions can even jump ahead of the mortgage in priority, which lenders hate.
Okay, moving on from environmental. Legal and regulatory compliance. Another potential minefield.
Definitely. You absolutely have to check this thoroughly. The big one here is zoning.
Right, you mentioned this. Does what I want to do match what the town allows me to do there?
Precisely. You might buy an old warehouse thinking it's perfect for converting to apartments. But is residential use allowed in that industrial zone? Probably not without a major zoning change, which can be a long, expensive, and very uncertain battle. Maybe you need a variance or a special use permit. Don't assume you can get it.
What else under zoning? You need to check specifics like density limits, how many units or how much square footage can you build, height restrictions, setback rules, how far buildings must be from property lines, parking requirements, often very specific based on use X spaces per 1,000 sesquiv of office, Y spaces per restaurant seat, and any special overlays like historic districts or restrictions on things like drive-throughs.
Building codes, too.
Yes. Does the current building meet current codes? Often older buildings don't, but they're grandfathered in. However, if you plan significant renovations or change the use of the building, you might trigger requirements to bring the entire building or large parts of it up to today's code standards. That can be a huge hidden cost. Looking at past building permits can give you some clues.
And other rules beyond zoning and building codes.
Sure. Broader environmental laws, stormwater management, air permits if you have emissions. ADA compliance is the property accessible to people with disabilities as required by the Americans with Disabilities Act. Local business licenses, do you need a liquor license, food service permit, entertainment license? Check the property's history too, any past regulatory violations or ongoing consent orders.
And it's not just public laws, right? There can be private rules.
Absolutely. Things recorded against the property title. CC&Rs, covenants, conditions, and restrictions, especially common in planned developments or office parks. They can dictate everything from landscaping to signage to what kind of business you can run. Deed restrictions, REAs, reciprocal easement agreements, very common in shopping centers, governing shared parking, access roads, common area maintenance costs. Ground leases add a whole other layer if you don't own the land itself. You need to read and understand all of these.
Okay, this next one seems critical, especially if you're buying for investment. Financial and tenant due diligence.
Paramount for income-producing properties like apartments, offices, retail. This is where you verify the economic engine of the property.
So looking at the seller's books.
Yes, you need their financial records, historical income statements, profit and loss, maybe cash flow statements, potentially property-specific tax returns. This shows past performance. But crucially, you need to verify it. Don't just take the P&L at face value.
How do you verify? What's the most important part?
Analyzing the leases. This is probably the single most critical piece for an income property. Get the full current rent roll list of all tenants, what space they occupy, what their base rent is, but then you need to actually read the leases themselves, each one.
What are you looking for in the leases?
So many things. Lease term, when does it start and end? Rent amount and any scheduled increases, rent bumps. Who pays for what? Utilities, repairs, maintenance. Are they triple net leases where tenants pay most expenses, or gross leases where the landlord pays? Landlord obligations, what are you responsible for? Options, does the tenant have an option to renew the lease? At what rent? Do they have an option to buy the property? Rights of first refusal, expansion rights, termination clauses, can they break the lease early if, say, an anchor tenant leaves? That's a co-tenancy clause.
Yeah.
Security deposits, how much are they properly held? Any rent that's been paid in advance or is past due?
That's a lot in just the leases.
It is. And you also look at the tenant mix. Is all your income tied to one big tenant who might leave? Are there exclusivity clauses like, did the supermarket get a promise that you won't lease to another grocery store? That limits your options. You need to review the history of operating expenses. What has it really cost to run this place? Taxes, insurance, management fees, repairs, utilities, and capital expenditures, major replacements like roofs, HVAC. Did the seller defer needed CapEx? Look for other income sources, laundry, parking fees. If the seller runs a business on site, like a hotel, you might need to look at the business financials too. And always stress test the numbers. What happens if that big tenant leaves? What if expenses go up?
Okay, last major category on the checklist, title and survey review. Making sure the seller actually owns it and you know exactly what land you're getting.
Essential. A title company where your attorney hires a title abstractor to perform a title search. They scour public records to confirm the seller has clear legal title to the property and can legally sell it to you. They're looking for any clouds on title.
Clouds?
Yeah.
Like problems.
Exactly. Anything that could question ownership or affect your rights. This includes things like unpaid property taxes, which can become a lien. Mechanics liens from contractors who worked on the property and weren't paid. Judgment liens from lawsuits against the seller. Mortgages that need to be paid off. Recorded easements, those rights for others to use part of your property, like utility lines or a shared driveway. Covenants and restrictions we talked about earlier, they identify everything recorded against that specific piece of land.
And this all gets summarized somewhere.
Yes, in the preliminary title report, often called the title commitment. This is the title company's report card. It says, here's who we think owns it, here's the legal description, and here's a list of all the exceptions, the liens, easements, restrictions, etc., that we plan to exclude from coverage in your final title insurance policy unless they're cleared up before closing.
So you have to review that very carefully.
Critically important. You and your attorney go through that list of exceptions. Is there anything unacceptable? An old mortgage that should have been released? A big easement running right where you plan to build? You raise objections, and typically the seller has to fix these issues before you'll close.
And that leads to title insurance itself.
Right. Title insurance is unique. It protects you against past problems with the title that might have been missed in the search, or things like fraud or forgery in previous deeds. It covers your financial loss and legal defense costs if someone later makes a valid claim against your ownership based on something that happened before you bought it.
Two types you mentioned, owners and lenders.
Yes. The lender always requires a loan policy to protect their loan amount. But you, the buyer, need to get an owner's policy to protect your equity investment. Don't skip the owner's policy. Title companies also offer endorsements, extra coverage for specific risks. Your attorney might recommend endorsements for things like zoning compliance, ensuring you have legal access, or covering potential environmental litters.
And you look at this alongside a survey.
Yes, you need an up-to-date survey, usually an Alton PS land title survey, which is a very detailed standard. You review it right alongside the title commitment. The survey is the map. It shows the exact boundaries, dimensions, and size of the property. It shows the precise location of all buildings, fences, parking areas, everything on the site.
And it shows the easements from the title report.
Exactly. It graphically depicts where those easements are located on the ground. It also shows building setback lines, verifies parking counts, check this against zoning, shows driveways and access points, and crucially, it checks for encroachments.
Meaning?
Is your building accidentally built partly on the neighbor's land? Is the neighbor's fence or garage on your property? These boundary issues can be major headaches and need to be resolved. The survey finds them.
Okay, that's a lot to check. Which brings us to Section 3. Who actually does all this work? It's not a one-person job.
Absolutely not. Due diligence is a team sport. While you, the buyer, are the captain, you need a crew of specialists. Trying to do it all yourself, even if you're experienced in real estate, is just asking to miss something critical.
So who's on the typical team? Your broker.
Your commercial real estate broker is often key, especially early on. They help find the property, structure the offer, and often act as a coordinator during due diligence, managing communication and timelines with the seller's side.
And the attorney seems vital.
Arguably the MVP of the due diligence team. Your real estate attorney drafts and negotiates the purchase agreement, making sure you have strong due diligence clauses and protections. Then, they review everything. The title commitment, the survey, all the leases, the zoning reports, the environmental reports, service contracts. They're analyzing the legal implications, spotting risks, advising you on how to proceed.
Then you have the consultants you hire directly.
Right. The property inspector or engineer for the physical stuff. The qualified environmental consultant for the Phase 1 and Phase 2 if needed. The surveyor for the boundary and site map. Depending on the deal, maybe an accountant or financial advisor to really scrutinize the numbers. And the title company or agent, they do the search, issue the insurance, and often handle the closing as the escrow agent.
What's the buyer's main role in all this, besides paying the bills?
Your role is to set the direction. Define your goals for the property clearly. What do you need? What's your risk tolerance? This shapes the whole due diligence strategy. Then you need to be actively involved. Read the reports your experts provide, understand them, ask questions, don't just file them away. You also need to formally request information and documents from the seller and review them thoroughly.
And act in good faith, you mentioned.
Yes, the idea is you're genuinely investigating the property for legitimate business reasons related to the purchase, not just fishing for an excuse to get out of the deal. You also usually have a confidentiality obligation regarding sensitive seller information, like tenant financials. And finally, based on what you find, you need to be ready to make decisions and negotiate.
What about the seller's obligations during this time?
They have duties too. Generally, a legal obligation to disclose any material facts they know about the property that could affect its value or your decision, hidden defects, known contamination, significant tenant issues. They need to cooperate reasonably with your investigation, provide access for inspections, hand over requested documents accurately and promptly, maybe make building managers available for interviews, and they need to be prepared for negotiation if you uncover legitimate issues.
And the lender, if you're getting a loan, they're involved too.
Deeply involved. Remember, the property is their collateral. They have skin in the game. So they require due diligence, often setting their own specific standards, especially for environmental and title. As we discussed, environmental is huge for lenders because of their own potential circle liability. They'll often mandate ASTM-A standards for the Phase I, review the report carefully, and might even have their own list of approved environmental consultants you have to use. They'll also require specific title insurance endorsements to protect their loan.
So how do you structure the plan? How do you decide how deep to go?
It's a balancing act. You tailor the scope based on the property itself, its age, type, past uses, your intended future use. Buying a brand new, simple warehouse needs a different level of scrutiny than a 100-year-old former factory site. You consider the transaction complexity and your own tolerance for risk.
And you weigh that against time and money.
Exactly. You have a limited time frame set in the contract, and hiring all these experts costs money. You need to be thorough, but also efficient and cost-effective. Using a comprehensive checklist helps keep everything organized, ensures all bases are covered, tracks deadlines, and clarifies who on the team is responsible for what.
And the final piece of process advice.
Document everything. Keep meticulous records of every report, every finding, every email, every conversation, every decision. This paper trail is absolutely vital. It supports your decision-making, provides the evidence you need for negotiations, justifies termination if necessary, and protects you if disputes arise later.
Okay, the investigation is done, the reports are in, the deadline is looming. Section 4, the decision point. What happens now?
Right, the clock runs out on the due diligence period eventually. Based on everything you and your team have learned, you're at a crossroads. You have to make a call.
Option 1 seems simplest. Everything looks good.
Yep. If the investigation didn't turn up any major deal breakers, the risks seem manageable, the property meets your needs, and the financials check out, you give the seller formal notice that you're satisfied with your due diligence, you waive that contingency, and you proceed towards closing.
Option 2, negotiation. Seems pretty common.
Very common. It's rare for due diligence on a commercial property not to find something. Maybe it's not a disaster, but it's an issue. A roof repair needed sooner than you thought. Some minor environmental cleanup needed. A zoning variance required for your sign package. An unfavorable clause in a key lease. You take these findings back to the seller.
Using them as leverage.
Exactly. You say, here's what we found, here's a report from our engineer consultant, here's what it will cost to fix or what the impact is. Then you negotiate. Maybe you ask for a price reduction. Maybe you ask for a closing cost credit. Maybe you ask the seller to fix this specific problem before closing. Good documentation and a skilled attorney are key here.
And option 3, time to walk away.
If the problems are just too big, too fundamental, they drastically change the economics of the deal, make your intended use impossible, or present risks you just aren't willing to take. Or if you try to negotiate based on your findings and you just can't reach an agreement with the seller, then you exercise your right to terminate.
And get the earnest money back.
As long as you follow the contract procedures, usually written notice before the deadline expires, yes, you terminate the agreement and get your deposit back. You're out your due diligence costs, inspector fees, attorney fees, etc., but you've avoided buying a potentially much bigger problem.
What kinds of things typically are deal breakers?
It varies, but common examples include discovering significant environmental contamination requiring very expensive remediation, finding out you absolutely cannot get the zoning or permits needed for your business, uncovering major structural failures or code violations that are prohibitively expensive to fix, serious title defects the seller can't or won't clear, like a major boundary dispute, or finding clear evidence the seller lied or misrepresented significant facts about the property's income or condition.
If you do decide to proceed, maybe after negotiating, are there ways to formalize protections?
Yes. Even if you move forward, you might build in protections. The purchase agreement can be amended to include specific representations and warranties from the seller about certain conditions that survive closing. You might negotiate an indemnity agreement where the seller promises to cover costs related to a specific known issue, like that environmental monitoring. Price adjustments directly reflect the cost of dealing with known problems.
And the lender will want protections too.
Definitely. If there were environmental issues, for example, the lender will likely require you, the borrower, to sign a separate environmental indemnity agreement, basically making you solely responsible for any cleanup. They might also put ongoing environmental covenants in the loan documents, requiring you to operate the property in compliance with all environmental laws.
Can due diligence findings affect financing or closing itself?
They certainly can. If major issues pop up, the lender might get cold feet, reduce the loan amount, or even deny the loan altogether if the risk profile changes too much. Or simply investigating or trying to resolve an issue might take time and cause delays in meeting closing deadlines or getting necessary permits.
Okay, let's wrap this up. Bringing it all together, the value here seems immense. This isn't just paperwork.
Not at all. The due diligence period is your shield. It's your magnifying glass. It's your negotiation tool. It is absolutely fundamental in commercial real estate. It's that critical time to truly deeply understand what you're buying, warts and all. The physical condition, the legal standing, the financial reality, the environmental status.
It stops you from getting blindsided by massive hidden costs after closing.
Right. It prevents those catastrophic financial surprises. It lets you make decisions based on hard evidence, not just gut feelings or a slick sales pitch. And it gives you the power to negotiate a fair deal that reflects the property's actual condition and value, or the power to walk away from a disaster waiting to happen.
So the big takeaway, the most crucial lesson from all these sources.
Be thorough. Get help. Don't cut corners here. Bring in qualified experts, attorney, environmental consultant, engineer, surveyor. Their fees are an investment, not an expense. Rushing the process or trying to save a few bucks by skipping steps, even on what looks like a simple deal, is incredibly foolish. Remember that $250 K property with potential millions in hidden environmental costs.
Killing.
That's the potential risk. The cost of doing proper due diligence pales in comparison to the cost of fixing a problem you didn't uncover beforehand. It's the homework that saves you from the final exam you absolutely cannot afford to fail.
Makes perfect sense. So, the final thought to leave everyone with. Given everything that can be hiding beneath the surface contamination, zoning traps, secret liens, crumbling infrastructure, what steps will you make sure you take on your next potential deal? How will you ensure your deep dive really uncovers everything you need to know before that deadline passes and it's too late?
Definitely something worth thinking about very carefully before you sign on the dotted line.
Indeed. And that concludes our deep dive into the critical due diligence period in U.S. commercial real estate.